Good evening.
Good evening.
We're glad to have you here. Welcome to Community Conversation at Acts 2 United Methodist Church. We have a very special evening where we hope to share a whole lot of wonderful information with you. A few weeks ago, one of the young mothers in our church, she's going to like that I said that. Yeah, you like that? Good. Yeah, one of the young moms in our church came to me and said, Pastor Robert, there's something going on in our community, and we need to get involved and do something about it. That brings us all to this evening, and we're so grateful for all of you who are here because we know you care about young people and you want to help young people just as we do. We're so glad to be partners with you and partners with our community and our schools in working out efforts to save young people's lives. I'd like to introduce that young mom to you now and invite her to say a couple of things. Jennifer Wallace.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight. I will have Robert introducing me at every event that I'm at from now on. So I am just a mom. I don't know about young, but I know that raising teens is really hard. And no matter how great of a parent you are, I don't want to say unprecedented, but we are facing unprecedented times with all of the challenges that our teens face. We've just gone through a pandemic, social media bullying, heightened depression, and so it's a real challenge for teens in today's society. My friends Allie and Courtney and Brooke and I discussed the idea of a town hall on this topic, and so thank you to my church, Acts 2, and especially Pastor Gorrell for being fully supportive whenever I brought this idea of a community conversation to him, and our church has just pulled together and made this happen. So we are so lucky to have a distinguished panel of experts here tonight, and I don't want to take up any more of their time. Our moderator is Erin Engelke, and she is the executive director of Calm Waters, which is a local nonprofit that serves grieving families. She's an accomplished leader and speaker, including doing a TEDx talk, and her deepest passion is empowering working moms to resist the pull to achieve work-life balance and instead live a full life. So Erin and I are going to be talking after this event. So if you do have questions for the panel during the event, we have QR codes that will be showing on the screen, and all of your handouts have a QR code, and so we will be moderating those and asking them to the panel on your behalf. So it's completely anonymous. You're welcome to submit a question, and we will get the experts to weigh in on it. So without further ado, Erin Engelke.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this incredibly important discussion. And certainly as head of a grief agency, it makes sense for me to be here. The families that walk through our front doors almost every single day are facing unimaginable loss for a lot of reasons. But sadly, suicide loss happens to be one of the forms of grief that we are seeing increasing numbers of. And so getting to be a part of this conversation means a lot to me. It means a lot to me professionally, but it also means a lot to me personally. Just to digress for one quick second, I have experienced a tremendous amount of grief and loss to suicide in my own life. My biological dad died by suicide when I was a very little girl. I don't have any memories of him, and I have wrestled with that over my life. I don't know the why. And sadly, that is the unfortunate consequence of suicide, is oftentimes we don't know the why. Later on in my life, my biological dad's brother also died by suicide, leaving me to kind of pick up the pieces for his life as well. And so suicide is certainly a topic that I know and understand well from this side. And I'm so grateful that we have a panel here tonight that represent a lot of different aspects of how to support the people that we love in our life who may wrestle with suicide, who may wrestle with feelings of emotional overwhelm. And I love that we're going to get to talk about really hard, heavy things tonight. And I do want to acknowledge that some of this may be even triggering to you. And if that's the case, I certainly give you permission to stand up and go to the back of the room if you need to step out if you need to, take a deep breath if you need to, whatever you need to do, because this certainly is a very heavy, heavy topic. With that said, I'm also a very positive kind of human, and so I might interject some humor every once in a while. My staff at Calm Waters know that, the work that we do is very heavy, but we don't have to be heavy and dark in the process. I certainly believe that there is a lot of hope in this world, and I believe that at the end of tonight that we can infuse some hope into the lives of each of you that are here tonight. One quick additional thing, I am also raising teenagers, so I have that perspective as well. I have 3 children that are 17, 15, and 12. So I get the teen mom life. Whew, it's rough. How many of you have teens? Yes, support group in the back when we're done, right? So again, a topic that I completely resonate with. All right, with all that being said, I would love to introduce very quickly our panelists. So excited to have them. I'm going to start with Dr. Kelly Roberts. Sorry, I know I'm jumping around a little bit. It's just because of it's not in priority. It's just because of my handout, I swear. She is Director of Graduate Programs in Human Sciences and Associate Professor in Behavioral and Social Science for Oklahoma Christian University, which happens to be my alma mater. So we are very, very glad to have her here. And I'm just going to highlight some of the personal things because I think it's always great to know a little bit of the personal things about people. So she's been married for 35 years. That's a long time. Kudos to her. Has 2 daughters and a dog named Tanks. I'm assuming this is an enormous dog. Yes. Okay. All right. Welcome to Dr. Kelly Roberts. Let's give her a round of applause. And then skipping back, we have Dr. Robert Gorrell, who you heard from just a moment ago. He is teaching pastor here at Acts 2 United Methodist Church. He has, as you can see from the handout, a lot of accolades, has done a lot in his very full life. But I love this. I kind of want to know about this later. He met his wife, Prudy, in church. Cute. And they have 2 married daughters. All right, round of applause for Dr. Robert Gorrell. Thanks for joining us. And then Meg Cannon. Meg is the Suicide Prevention Program Manager for the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. That is a very big job, y'all. Incredibly grateful to have Meg here with us. She and her partner Jason have 2 of the best, evidently, rescue dogs named Sally and Stanley, and they live here in Edmond. Welcome to Meg. And then finally, I love this because I know Lauren. This is so fun. Lauren, I never know how to say your last name. Will you say it?
It's Riepl.
Riepl. That is so much easier than I ever make it out to be. I have a very difficult last name, so I always have to make sure I'm saying people's last names right. Lauren Riepl. She is a suicide survivor and speaker. She is full of life, y'all. I can't wait for you to hear from her. She's an incredible human who has poured into a lot of aspects of our community, certainly from my vantage point, the nonprofit community, and has made a huge, huge difference. And I think that we're going to be very blessed to hear from her tonight. Thank you for being here, Lauren. Okay, who's ready to start drilling these panelists with questions? Oh, just me. Okay, here we go. So as Jennifer said, I really do want to encourage you all. I'm assuming, yep, there's the QR code. Please be thinking of questions. I want this to be a very interactive opportunity for those of you in the audience. I certainly have a plethora of questions that I will be asking, but I think it is important for you to feel like you have a say in what is being discussed as well. So to kick things off, I'm just going to ask a very open-ended question, and whoever wants to respond to this is welcome to, and all of you can if you would like. But to begin, what are some signs that a young person may be considering suicide?
I'll go first. So as Erin introduced me, I am a suicide survivor, and when she says that means I survived my suicide. So as a teen, that I have had a depressive disorder my entire life, and I know as a teen, and I hate to admit this, but it's true when they say that partying and staying out late, ignoring family rules, turning in on themselves, using drugs, teen sex. All of those were cries for help, at least in my respect, and I can say that those still ring true today. And I know the big difficulty with that is how to respect those boundaries with your kid, but also knowing when to cross the line into investigating further in respect to these behaviors.
Great.
I would add, social withdrawal, becoming more and more isolated, decrease in hygiene, somebody who's always, taking care of their hair and things, suddenly not doing that type of thing anymore, talking about death a lot, talking about suicide, even threatening to kill themselves, and preparatory behavior, like giving away all of their prized possessions. And the one that I've seen a couple of times, very, very depressed for a long period of time, and then suddenly everything's just great. And that's really a tricky trap when you see that behavior.
I fully agree. That's actually one of the biggest warning signs, is if your child or if anyone in your life has been really, really down and nothing has changed. You haven't gone for treatment, you haven't gone for therapy, you haven't tried medications, and all of a sudden everything is light and bright and perfect and amazing. That a lot of times can mean that self-harm is imminent. So that is something to significantly, make sure you're very much focusing on that. We also hear, we hear students saying we pull away from people, they're pulling away from their friends, they're getting more down on themselves. And I know 100 years ago when I was a teenager, we were very dramatic. I mean, come on, let's face it, there is maybe no one more dramatic in this world than a 13-year-old teenage girl. I am proof of that. Ask my mom. But when your child says something like, I'm just going to die if this doesn't happen, you have to make sure you truly listen to that, because there are times that that's not just a teenager being dramatic. There are times that that's real. And so you do need to push a little bit to find out.
So I would just add that the summary piece I hear, as well as something I was going to go ahead and add, is that your child. You know who they were, you know who they are. You have seen kind of like this constant of the highs and the lows, their temperament, what to expect in general. Developmental stages kind of tweak that occasionally. And so if we tip over into that preteen or adolescent stage, there are some normal things that you can expect, some changes and some higher or lowers, like in that range that you might see. But the thing I think that all of the panelists have said is that if there is a change, if something changes and doesn't change back, if you see a gradual withdrawal, or if you see something that not to be true about the child that you have known since they were born or since you've had them. And so I think watching and kind of monitoring, you have spidey senses, trusting your gut. And I think the only other thing as parents, how we do things, is if your gut can't be trusted, because some people had terrible trauma when they were growing up, or they see the world with a certain lens, you might get a gut buddy, and just say, you're around this child all the time. This is some changes I'm seeing. Do you see those too? Have you noticed? And so, but I do think that you will know. And checking in with anybody as an extra set of voice is always good. Sometimes change in behavior is only isolated to home or to school, but if it's pervasive and you see that change over time, it's important.
Yeah, all of that was absolutely excellent. So, as our kids grow and developmentally change, you do have a tendency to see behaviors adjust, right? Like a lot of times they want to spend more time with friends, or they want to hang out in their room and play video games or whatever it is. Sometimes those are very normal. At what point do you determine, or how do you continue that relationship where they're continuing to talk to you and you're giving them the space to talk to you? How do you create that safe space for those conversations to happen?
I think it's important when you have a child to make sure that your child knows that your door is always open. I know one family that does what they call, dang it, now the word left my mind, but they have one Sunday a month where their children can come to them and they can tell them anything. And there's no repercussions, there's no punishment. It's basically the time for the child to come and say, Mom, I'm feeling this. Dad, I did this. This is what's going on in my life. Make sure your child knows that you are open to hearing those things and that your first step isn't to just go, all right, you're in trouble. Listen to them and listen to what they're saying. And I absolutely love what Kelly said about a gut buddy. One thing to know that we always go over and over and over with kids, even little bitty kids, that trusted adult sometimes might not necessarily be mom or dad for them. It can be hard. I am 44 years old and I still don't want to call my mom and say, Mom, I messed up. And so I think about how hard that was as a teen. So sometimes that trusted adult needs to be an aunt or an uncle or someone in the church. Know who that trusted adult is so that you two can also have a conversation on the side, so that if your kid is confiding that something's wrong, that you're getting kind of that gut buddy, you're getting that other check to know that there's a problem.
I share, actually, I give advice sometimes to parents because this is a real common question, you know, where you have, because our lives with our children are like an X, okay? And so the highest level of control is over here, and then the lowest level of autonomy for the child. And as they grow in their autonomy, you know, and then the level of control that you have is less and less. And right in the middle of the X is adolescence. So there is the control and autonomy, and sometimes there's a struggle there. Sometimes there's, you know, parents are talking to themselves going, this is the time, they're differentiating, they're making their own world, you know, how much do I lean in or out? And the gut is always to lean in, and then the self-talk is maybe we're leaning out too much, you know, we were confusing. So one of the things that I tell teenage parents of teens is there are two ways that are really naturally occurring ways to get a conversation started if something has stalled, or if you have a question that you feel like may be lingering or out there. So one of them is this. When we're raising children, we're told as early infants, we're not supposed to make eye contact, gaze, you know, get in, like developmentally, there's mirror neurons and they're developing just like this. But as teenagers, a lot of times what we have to do is we go to Sonic. So we're not looking at each other. Things are just happening side by side, shoulder to shoulder. Or we're doing something where we're not looking at each other. And sometimes the conversation, because there's that space, comes easier, right? The second thing is that I had two. The other one is sometimes you can do a secondary topic. So if you think there's a topic that you want to directly address, but you think that maybe knowing your child it's too uncomfortable and they'll back too far away, you can ask in general. I had a crazy idea. I just saw this the other day with somebody in your class, and I was wondering, do you think your friends are blah, blah, blah? Because projective questions, asking about their friends, actually makes it safe to go ahead and answer with their own perspective. Does that make sense? And so checking in about the friends or some crazy idea you had or a thought you had about, those two things are like the first level of uncracking the silence code sometimes.
I encourage parents to be intentional in the kind of culture they want to create. Don't just think it's going to happen. Yeah. You have to really work at it, and you have to start those conversations when they're young and build trust so that when they become teenagers, hopefully you'll have that foundation of trust. I also think it helps in some ways to ritualize it, and I think someone else kind of mentioned that. In our family, Sunday after church, we sit down and talked about life with our kids, and we did that from the beginning. And by the time they were teenagers, they were even bringing their friends to Sunday afternoon to say, you know, this is Mary, she's my friend. She needs to talk to somebody. But they knew that was a safe time, a time we would talk about the deep stuff, and a time we would do that in a way that was, you know, we showed we were allies for them. And that's that's the thing, the mistake I think a lot of times parents get into is they become advice givers or advice orderers before they're allies. And your kids have to know you're an ally before they're going to hear any of the rest of it.
I'm going to speak from the perspective of the child. The first time I tried to commit suicide, I was 14 years old. But I knew at 10 there was something going on with me. And this is a time where you have to truly address like your parenting style and learn about generational trauma. You can't parent the way maybe your parents did. You have to ask yourself if you are coming to your child from a position of understanding or judgment. Are you there to parent or listen? There were many times that I went to my own mom, and she didn't agree with my emotional state, and because she didn't agree with how I felt, she wasn't really listening or hearing me. It often left me feeling incredibly isolated. But that's how her mother raised her, and that's probably how my great-grandma was as well. So this is a time to break familial traditions in parenting. Kids are not going to come to you if they feel that you can't be trusted, if they feel that this is going to result in heartache from them. I had many times where I was trying to find any adult who would take me seriously, who would hear I'm 38 years old, and I still can't talk about this without crying. This trauma has impacted me my entire life. My mom wasn't a bad person. She just didn't know what she was doing. In the 90s, this information wasn't as readily available as it is now. So I encourage every parent here to spend time actually reading about what it means to be an ally. If your kid comes to you with something deep, do you actually know what to say in response? Do you actually know what to do if they seriously need help? Do you understand where the line is between just being incredibly upset and being ready to self-harm? Nobody here has the intention of being a bad parent, but that doesn't mean that mistakes can't and won't be made. And it's about considering how these conversations will go and how your kid will carry them for the rest of their life. Because like I said, I'm 38, and talking to y'all about this is very hard. So I just want you to have a glimpse of what one possible future could be based on how these conversations go with your kids.
Lauren, thank you so, so much for that vulnerability. And I think that you are raising such an important point in the sense that as parents, we are no good to our children if we haven't taken care of ourselves. So our mental health is equally as important. And if you have not addressed perhaps your own generational trauma, childhood trauma, I certainly have childhood trauma that I could have, if not been addressed, pushed onto my own children, right? And so it's kind of like the analogy when you go on a flight and they talk about, hey, if, we run out of air, what do you need to do first? You put that mask on who? Yourself. And quite frankly, as a parent and as a mom, that feels very counterintuitive to me because I first want to put it on everyone else. My kids, my husband, like probably everybody that's sitting around me, honestly. I'll go last. But if I were to go last, who am I any benefit to? Not a single human. So I am certainly an advocate for making sure that every parent, because again, there's no guidebook to parenting. We just have these children and we just figure it out. We got to make sure we're in a good place so that when our child comes to us with a big, big burden, a big emotion, we can handle it because it's not triggering to us. So how, kind of taking it a step further, how do you begin the dialogue about even just mental health with our kids, right? That's a big topic. how do you begin having that kind of dialogue? What language do we need to use? Can we say the word suicide? There's all these perceptions that if you even say the word, then they're going to do it, right? So let's debunk that myth right now. Who wants to take it?
Hi, it's me again.
Taylor Swift.
I'm a little, right. I've collected myself some. My mom and dad didn't tell me that our family had a history of mental illness until I was an adult. My own sister didn't tell me that she had struggles until we were adults. I spent my entire childhood just feeling like an outsider within my own family, that all of them could have no idea what I was dealing with. I was an island unto myself. And then when I did find out as an adult, I was like, you guys, so much of this heartache that I carry would have been so much easier if I had known I wasn't carrying this burden alone. So for me, if my mom and dad had ever just made mention that, like, your grandpa had some problems and, like, I have some stuff going on, it made me feel a sense of solidarity within my family. I would have felt so much safer and more comfortable talking to them about truly what was going on with me, because I wouldn't have felt so isolated in respect to that. So if you do have something going on, like, share that kindred spirit with your family and, like, show that it is a two-way street, it is an open dialogue, that parents aren't this stoic island unto themselves, but like a person with feelings and a heart too.
Lauren, that's actually very affirming to hear, because my children all know about my biological dad's suicide, and they've known about that. It's not something that I have kept hidden from them, because I want them to understand that this is a part of what has shaped who I am today, and that I want them to always feel comfortable to come talk to me about hard things. And so it's very affirming to know that that is the right path. I think we might have a question.
Several questions.
Great,
but
let's hear them.
I'll just start with one for
Please.
now. It's on this topic. So can you explain further what is generational trauma? Like, give us some examples, and also give us some examples of what that might look like in our children.
That's awesome. Who wants to take that one?
Murray Bowen, Edwin Friedman, they both did magnificent studies of how we pass on trauma from generation to generation. In fact, Friedman's book's called Generation to Generation. And sometimes we don't even do it consciously. We're reacting to some pain that we have, and we pass those behaviors on to the next generation. The classic example is alcoholism, but it can be any kind of behavior. It can be the way, it really is the way we handle anxiety, the way we handle hardship, the way we handle heartbreak. And what makes that so powerfully destructive is that we keep it in the shadows. Exactly referring to the previous question, we don't talk about it. Talking about it, getting it out in the light, really takes the power out of it. In my own family, it was the first time I did what's called a genogram, where you make a list of all your ancestors and stuff, that I realized in every generation, every male in our family had an alcohol problem. Every one. It was just shocking. But it could be child abuse, it could be anything, it could be something that seems sort of, not that bad. It's just the way we handle sadness, for instance. But we pass that on generation to generation unless we get it out and talk about it and deal with it.
Trauma also can come in the form of things like a divorce, a death of a family member, a loss of a pet, if it's a beloved pet and you don't deal with that properly. It could come in the form of moving frequently. I hear from lots of military families that when families move constantly and they're continually uprooting their child and they're having to make new friends everywhere they go, anything like that can cause trauma. And you might think it doesn't, and you can be an adult, hello, I'm Taylor Swift too, and go, I don't have any drama. My parents divorced when I was 12, no big deal. And then I hit adulthood and I went, wait a minute, yeah, I do. I have some hangups. And until you address that, therapy's a great thing. Going back to the question you asked, I am going to take an aside. Suicide is not a bad word.
Right.
Everybody say it with me. Suicide. It's not a bad word. It is hard to say. I have been in suicide prevention for not quite 2 years now. It is still sometimes hard for me to talk about. But if you ask someone if they are considering suicide or self-harm, it is not going to put that thought in their head.
Nope.
If they're thinking about it, they're already thinking about it. They're waiting for you to ask. So, sorry, had to answer that one.
Thank you for, that was what I wanted said.
Yeah, I also want to share with you all that sometimes if you don't know what that intergenerational trauma is, you might invite yourself and your family just to do a preventative genogram or a family 2 or 3, session genogram, because when you see all of where we came from and maybe where we're getting ready to go and see some of the themes, both positive and growth area themes or, reflective themes, like we're porch setters, we spit watermelon, but also these are the kinds of things that like we have a lot of bankruptcy or a lot of financial trauma, or there was fires, or whatever it was, what's the common trauma. Seeing that, not only if you name it, you can claim it, but it has no power, but it's such a good way to look at the story and find positive frames. If you're feeling your heart racing, if you feel your muscles contracting, if you feel shortness of breath, like you can't get air, that's called pseudodyspnea. If you have different kinds of reactions when your child or something's going on, you probably have some trauma, and that signals for you, and it's possible that you'll even see those patterns happen in your children. It's just miraculously, passing on. So there's some really cool resources that we might share with Jennifer at the end, short videos that are very informative and very cool. So
Yeah. I was going to recommend some additional resources, and I think maybe even at the end, if we could verbally, if you can remember them, one that sticks out in my head, my staff and I do a book club, and we love to read and learn so much about, of course, grief and loss, but a lot of things. And one of the books that we read very recently was What Happened to You. It's written by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry. Excellent, outstanding book, and I would highly encourage all of you to read it. I think oftentimes in our society, when we see, let's say, a child misbehaving or having behavioral issues or acting out, we say, what is wrong with them? Right? I'm sure we've all thought it, said it, even with adults. What is wrong with them? And this book challenges that concept to say, it's not what is wrong with them. Let's ask the question, what happened to them? Because it is very likely that something happened to them in their life, and more often than not, in their childhood. So strongly recommend that book. Any others that you all can think of off the top of your heads?
well, it's a little deep, but there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yep.
And it's really
That's a good
helpful to know about the research and then just you kind of piece it down. There's also there are the National Health Institutes out of England. There's one that's called ANS, A-N-S, and it talks about our autonomic nervous system and how children pick up signals from us and how we send those signals and how trauma kind of carries with us even in our body. And so that's one of the ones I'll send to Jennifer because it's great.
Those are great. Good.
One to be a little more age specific on Instagram and social is the Mental Health Project. They create content that is designed to create meaningful conversations and also to train people in proper responses to people who might be in emotional crisis or just have a mental health and wellness diagnosis in general.
Great.
Another one for young folks to think about is the Trevor Project. If you have a loved one who identifies as LGBTQ or even an ally, lots of great resources there. And I've got to plug 988 Oklahoma while I have a chance. That's my baby. That's our baby at DMH. Lots of great information on the website. You also, and I think we'll probably talk about this a little more later, but you can call or text 988 even if you just have questions. It doesn't matter if you're in crisis, and it's not just for suicide, it's any mental health, or even we can help folks who Okay, so going back to high school, college, early psych, we all know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We know that for someone to be able to improve mentally, they have to have a safe place to stay, they have to have food, they have to have those safety things. So what 988 can help with is if a person is unhoused and or hungry, we also can help direct people to get those things as well. And then there's fun stuff online you can download, and you can get, like I've got squeezy brains and things like that too. So.
And follow 988 on social media as well.
Yes,
They have
follow
great content.
988 and follow ODMH on social
Yep.
media as well. We do, like for example, yesterday for prevention, we did a harm reduction video on how to test drugs for fentanyl. But that's a whole different topic.
Yeah, for sure. What other questions do we have, Jennifer?
We have a couple on bullying, so I'm going to ask them both together, and then whoever wants to respond. I know that Meg and I talked about some of the resources that she's shared with Edmond Public Schools. So one of the questions is, what is the process in our middle schools when bullying is reported? And then an additional question is, bullying at primary middle school has been a topic discussed for years since our kids have been in grade 1, and it's constantly talked about in their class, practice acceptance, inclusion, etc., and it seems worse than ever. So how can a topic with so much proactive focus seem to be getting nowhere towards improving?
That's a difficult question to answer. Number one, I can't answer all of it because I am not physically in the schools. Schools are supposed to, I believe, by law, mandated to have a plan in place what steps they take if they're aware bullying is going on. Unfortunately, I do some volunteer work with a youth LGBTQ plus youth and young adult group. And what we find even with these kiddos is that bullying sometimes occurs away from anybody else knowing. They'll come to group and things will be great and one will have a problem and they'll say, well, yeah, they've been bullying me online. And so that's something that's more difficult to handle. You know, obviously, if nobody knows about it, so it's one of those things where encourage kids to obviously talk about it and keep talking about it. If the first person you approach doesn't help you, go to the next one. If that person doesn't help you, go to the next one. Go to the next one and be that person, be that kiddo who is loud about it until somebody says, okay, I'm going to help you. That said, we do know that bullying can be an aspect that can lead to suicidality. It typically is not the only cause of suicide. It's usually a factor. There's usually many other factors. There's myriad reasons for suicide. There's no one reason, which is why it's so hard to prevent. But with bullying, again, be a safe place for your child. One other thing, if someone comes to you and says, hey, I heard your child saying such and such, remember, it's my princess. She may be your princess, he may be your prince, but that doesn't mean that they're not being cruel. It doesn't mean that they're not participating. So keep an open mind with that, but make sure your child has that resilience. Have them come to you. And when they do come to you, listen to them and get them the help that you can. The schools all are being trained. All of Edmond Public Schools counselors who are currently employed were trained on February 20th in a curriculum we have called Lifelines. It's one of our most intense curriculums, and we trained them for a full day in prevention. It was done on an in-service day. There were 3 of us there who did all the training, so they have had lots of suicide prevention training. It is required by the state that everyone who works in a school, in a public school in the state of Oklahoma, must be trained in suicide prevention every 2 years. That is to include bus drivers, janitors, cafeteria workers. It does not matter who you are. If you work in a public school, you are to be trained in suicide prevention. And we do have a list of programs that are acceptable. So those are evidence-based programs that is done.
I grew up here in Edmond. I went to John Ross and Sequoia and Edmond North and Edmond Memorial. I even got my master's degree from the University of Central Oklahoma. And one thing that I can say for sure is this. Children are blank slates, and they learn hate from others. They learn intolerance from others. And I'm going to say a bad word right now. It's DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a great thing because it saves lives. It teaches children how to be accepting of others, to be interested in those that are different than them, to look at children, their peers, and think just because they're different than me doesn't make them a bad person or mean that I should dislike them or torment them. We have to remember when being around our teens, when being around our kids, if we're espousing adult opinions, they're going to hear it. But this is also why there's current legislation being introduced to limit teens' access to social media and the internet. I grew up without social media, as most of us probably did. I don't think Facebook existed until I was in college, and you still needed a college email to even have it. I think you guys need to be aware of your kids' screen time and what kind of content they're having access to. They may think you're being harsh by keeping them off social media, but in the grand scheme of things, I think they'll be better people for it in the long run, because they'll have the opportunity to form their own opinions instead of trying to recreate what they feel influenced to recreate. I was bullied in Edmond. My mom was a teacher here, and it's hard being on the lower income side of things when growing up in an affluent town of Edmond. So what are you teaching your kids about kindness? How are you demonstrating that? But the also final part of that is like self-esteem. How do you talk about yourself in front of your kids? What do they know about loving themselves and ignoring what strangers have to say? And what do they know to do if they find themselves in an extreme bullying situation where they feel like there's no turn? I see a lot of Edmond parents lament that they don't feel that the schools are doing enough. And it's understandable. They're not trained. They don't necessarily have the staff. But in regards to what the policy is, if your child is being bullied, you are supposed to go to the school, make contact with the principal and the counselor, set up a meeting. There's a form you actually have to fill out. You can find it in the Edmond Student Code of Conduct handbook that is available online and at your school. You have to make sure that it's signed and documented. Otherwise, the school will not go forward with anything in regards to doing this. But also there's options. If you find, the reason I went from North to Memorial is because the bullying was so bad I couldn't handle it. I had to go somewhere else. And a lot of times, maybe we incorrectly assume as adults that we've made a commitment or it's going to be too much of a hassle. But if your kid comes to you and tells you, like, I can't do this. I literally cannot stand what is being said and done to me every day. Don't force them to stay in that situation. If you can find an option for them to go to another school, to go virtual, anything, and you can give them that lifeline in the grand scheme of things, that's going to be so much better than forcing them to stay in a situation that's killing them on the inside.
I would add that just like child abuse or just like any other kind of really intense or traumatic behavior, sometimes we just don't want to believe it the first time our child says something about bullying. And so that denial may kick in, and it may even kick in by diverting the topic or trying to soothe it or de-escalate or like make it less than what you just heard. It's so hard to realize and hear that our child is being subjected to pain and being bullied. Believing them the very first time, because it probably took lots and lots and lots of energy and gumption and courage for them just to get there. They may have been bullied a week or a month or a year before they actually told you. So being ready when your child hearing it and then responding to it is so important.
Emil Durkheim did a pioneering study on suicide. It was so powerful what he studied. He discovered that kids survived in culture better when they were connected in groups and where they felt valued. They felt like their life mattered. And at the time he studied, he was a Catholic, happened to be a Catholic, he was shocked because the group that had the lowest suicide rate among teenagers were folks who were Jewish. And as he studied it, he found that was because they were, through their culture and through their religion, it was just reinforced all the time, the value of human life. And I think kids today struggle with understanding that and don't always have positive ways of learning that. You have to be really intentional in how your kids are taught values, and particularly how they're taught the value of human life and how they're socialized. We live in a culture of rage, and impulse control is a tough issue for any kid to learn. I was an angry 6'2", 245-pound, 16-year-old. And if it hadn't been for a great football coach, I don't know where I'd be. I mean, he taught me impulse control. He taught me how to channel my emotions and feelings. And I think that's really important. And it happens through the socialization. in houses of worship, in band, in choir, in scouts, in sports, but you have to be intentional about making sure your kids are involved in those things so they understand the value of the lives around them and cherish that and cherish those lives, and also understand the value of their own life so that if they are bullied, they'll say something. They'll speak up to their parents. They'll speak up to their teachers and coaches. But it comes out of that sense of belonging and community, and I have value, and what somebody else says about me can't take that value away.
I love everything you all have articulated just now. And I think that, certainly giving some perspective from my own family's life, we recognize the pull, right, that our kids are facing, the pull from their phones, the pull from their friends. And we as parents need to be that almost like that anchor, that safe space where when they come home, that if they do need to express anger, upset, all the emotions, that they can do that and you're not going to overreact. I don't know about y'all, but it's real hard for me when my kids come to me with a big bleh and I want to be like, what? You really have to manage that, right? Because the moment you overreact is the very moment they decide, I am never coming to my mom again about that, right? Or dad. And so being able to model that kind of, or create that family culture, again, I think is super important. We have a rule in our house where, again, I have 3 children. My husband and I work. We're very busy, but we aim to have family dinner as often as we can. And when we do all sit around the table, the rule that we have instituted probably over a decade ago was that there are no phones at the table. We don't allow phones at our table. And every once in a while, those cell phones creep up on that table, y'all. I don't know how it happens, but you want to know every single time who around that table is the one that says, no phones at the table, you guys. It's the kids. Because that is their safe place. That is that creation of community. That's when all the good stuff gets talked about. And so creating that culture, that sense of value of this is where we can just be us. We don't need to be influenced by all the crap that's happening out there, right? Because there's a lot of pressure. I've even sensed that just from what's been talked about here tonight. There's a lot of pressure for our kids. There's pressure for us as parents to raise the quintessential perfect kid. There's no such thing, right? So I'm sure there's more questions. Yes?
So on the topic of modeling behavior, what is the best way for parents to support their kids to go to therapy, especially if they're very resistant to that?
I always wanted my mom to go to therapy, and she wouldn't. She didn't think she needed it. And so I was like, well, if you don't need it, then I don't need it. So, I think that's another thing about just normalizing it is like, if you're going, like, it's not a punishment to make them go. It's because, like, you want them to have that space, maybe if it can't be you for them to go to have that professional that can say the right things and elicit the right questions and get maybe the answers and the introspection from your child that maybe y'all can't have. But I definitely think just normalizing it and not making it seem like it's a bad thing. My mom tricked me into going to a depression study when I was 15 years old. I still am not over that one. So don't do that for sure. Like, that's a definite no. But yeah, I just think normalizing it and showing them that like therapy can be great and that it's not saying that there's anything wrong with you. It's just saying that like we all need a little help sometimes. And like I go, you go, we go. It's a whole Dr. Seuss kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I echo that 100%. I promise you there is not a soul in this room who could not benefit from therapy. Yep. I was that person who said, no, I'll never go. Come on. It's the best thing ever. It's like you have a professional best friend who will tell you the truth and who will help you work through things. And man, yeah, it is not a bad word. It's a good thing. Model that for your kids from a young age and be open with them. If you decide to try to go to therapy, if you decide to go, tell them, hey, I can't go. I got to go talk to my therapist today.
I would agree, just making it normal, talking about it, being open about it, particularly with younger kids, being able to walk right up to the door of the therapist office with them and them knowing you're going to be there, waiting for them. But whatever it takes, but encourage them, help them understand that it's something to help them.
Yeah, and I also think that there's so many things that we do good jobs as a family is normalizing. Dentists, annual checkups. There are other things like maybe you're good at maintaining your car or other kinds of things. And occasionally I think, why can't we just normalize a family wellness checkup, emotional wellness checkup? And we're all going to go in together and just talk about how our family is well together, or if there's something that we can get better at or something like that. Because professionals, like what you mentioned about having a smart best friend, every therapy model will include the very first steps are building a therapeutic alliance, helping you feel comfortable, getting to know uniquely each person in the room if it's more than one, and making sure that the trust level is there before they can move on. And so who doesn't want to just get known, and be heard? And so if you are modeling that for your child, and I do know that there is such an escalation. Sometimes it's like a tug of war, but if you're modeling, man, that gives you a pretty decent foundation to speak from, when you're saying we're all going to go in for family checkup. So.
My husband and I have our own professional best friend, and we love her. We see a marriage therapist together, not because our marriage is in shambles, but because we don't want it to be. And we absolutely love her. In fact, she tells us, y'all don't need to be coming to me. And we're like, yes, we want to keep coming to you. And we talk about that with our kids. Like, they know on this day, this time, you have to find a ride home from school because mom and dad are going to go see our therapist. And it's not a weird thing. We don't make it a weird thing. It's not something our children have anxiety about. In fact, some of our children want to go see our professional best friend also, and I love that. My youngest daughter, who's 12, she for years has told me, Mom, you're my best friend. No, you're actually my therapist. And I love that. Like, that has been such a normal part of our family dynamic that even joking, although I think she really thinks I am her therapist, which I don't know what to say about that, but, that has become a very normal part of our family, and I think that's really special. So, other questions?
I have a whole list. So how do you continue to enforce family rules with a child who is withdrawn, depressed, and suicidal? I don't want to push the child over the edge, but I need certain standards of behavior upheld. It's a delicate balance there. So how would you address that?
One of the things that consistent expectations, clear expectations do is they give us a sense of the belonging and community, just like we heard about earlier, rituals, the expectations. So in some ways, many times, every family is unique and every child is unique. So I think if you're worried that much, checking in with a professional and doing a consult might be good anyway. But making sure that the expectations, I want you guys to hear that is actually safe. It's creating a safety environment. So if you have clear expectations and they're reasonable and there's something that you are it's typical of the family, it might have a sense of normalcy for someone who is feeling depressed. But if they're that low and they're that withdrawn, probably you need to be checking in with a professional at that point anyway. So.
Yeah, I would add, don't do it alone.
Yeah.
You need to build alliances and friendships and help with mental health professionals, with teachers, school counselors. It's a part of our cultural shift is once we were raising children in extended loving families where there were grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins and so forth reinforcing good, healthy behavior. Most kids don't grow up with that now, and they feel isolated already. If they get on that track where they're struggling with depression, they become more and more isolated. And sometimes in our families, the tendency is to sort of hide that. And we don't want to let anybody know there's something going on. And that's just the time you need to reach out and get help. Again, in this situation described, I would certainly say, contact a mental health professional, get advice, don't hesitate. If somebody out there is, if this is a real situation for somebody, talk to one of these panelists before you go home tonight. Get help. Don't do it alone.
And this is going to sound like all I want to do this evening is to plug 988, but whomever asked that question, it sounds like you're at the point where you do need help, and you possibly need help right now. You can call or you can text 988. The folks who answer those phones are trained. They are trained professionals who can help establish if we need to do an evaluation right now. If your child is in crisis or is close to that tipping point, they can do an evaluation over the phone. They can send a mobile crisis team to you to do an evaluation in your home. They can do that, and it's usually done within less than 2 hours, depending upon the time of day. It does not matter if it is 3 a.m. You might get a crisis team that's yawning a little bit, but they will still come respond to you if you need help. I promise. I know them. They're good. But 988 can help that. One of the biggest questions I get a lot of times is, okay, I know my child needs help. How do I do it? That to me is the best place to start. If you don't know where to start, you start there, and they will help you then take those next steps, get that child stabilized, help you figure out what to do.
Good.
Great.
What other questions, Jennifer?
I'm pretty sure that you just answered the question, but so when someone tells you, a friend or family member tells you that they have a plan to commit suicide, you would recommend 988. Are there any other resources that you would recommend? Like, what do you do in that situation?
988 immediately. Do not wait. Do not leave the person alone. Stay with the person. Do not let them go out to their car. Do not let them go to the bathroom. Stay with that person like you are attached. Call 988. If it is imminent, like if they have a method, a weapon, a bottle of pills that they say, a firearm, something like that, you can call 911, or if you can get them in your car, get them to an emergency room or to a mental health urgent care centers. We've got more of those that are opening, that are coming online by the month. There will be one opening at 15th and Kelly in the old Mercy building. I think it's slated to open in January. So it's going to be a few months, but that will be open. That will be an option. We do now have some mental health ER facilities that are co-located with emergency rooms. The big takeaways: call 988. If necessary, call 911. I would start with 988. If possible and you can't get them stabilized or 988 takes too long, get them in a vehicle and get them to the emergency room, and do not leave them alone.
And I want to tell you how powerful it is for someone to tell you something like that and then please beg you not to do anything. So the thing is that this is the time when you do not listen to them, okay? And it's really hard. Sometimes I have been face to face with people begging not to do this or not to do that. And, 48 hours later, they're like, thank you for saving my life, And so it's really, really hard. That dynamic of interpersonal power going, please don't, I'm begging you. This is where you push through and you get really strong and you're really courageous and just do it anyway.
And they may be angry, but they can be angry and alive.
Yeah.
This is why I am alive, is this behavior right here that they are talking about. June 5th will be the 6-year anniversary of me surviving my actual committed suicide attempt. And thank you. If my best friend had listened to me, she wouldn't have called my dad and had him come to my house immediately. I checked into a facility that night and was there for 3 months. And so I can absolutely confirm what they just told you will save lives. It saved mine. And I thank them all the time for just ignoring me for once.
So I know that we have several educators in the room, and so one of our questions is, how can educators appropriately help support students with mental health concerns without overstepping parent and family boundaries?
That's an excellent question. Who would like to take that one?
I think the place you start is to really understand your role. You are not the parents, that's correct, but you are important allies. And allies, stand with students, they affirm them, they encourage them, and they work hard to do what's best for them. I sort of give the example of being a good uncle or a good aunt. They're not your child, you're not deciding their moral values and things like that, but you sure need to be responsible for helping make sure they're alive at the end of the day. They're fed and they're cared for. So I think just recognizing that role and working out of that role of being a strong ally and being there to support and care for them, not replacing the parents, but doing what an ally would do or a good friend would do.
If you are an educator and you have not been trained, well, heck, if you're anyone and you have not been trained in one of our suicide prevention programs, get with me. I think my contact information is in the pamphlet. Feel free to email me or call me or text me. I can get you hooked up with our next training that we have going on. We do them all the time. If we wanted to do a training here at the church, Pastor Robert, we would be happy to come do that. They can last as little as 45 minutes. And you're going to go through it and you're going to go, well, this just all makes sense. But we can help with that. And if you're an educator, definitely get with me because I have access to other resources that are online that are prevention that you can access through your school, and I can help you with that as well.
I want to say to the educators that you all are absolutely essential to the strength and the bonds of the community. And I really appreciate this question because there are so many things that you may not even consciously be aware of being a teacher because you're thinking about your students right now. But remember, every student that we have all the way through college now has only known post 9/11. So the culture of fear is completely a different shift than we had before 9/11. Every one of you all now who have students right now are in post-lockdown, intense disconnection kinds of things. Every one of you now are post 9/11, post-COVID, and the highest engagement in screen time in the world. So you have 3 layers of trouble that teachers that were 25 years ago had no way to even conceptualize. When students walk into your room and you're socially and emotionally regulated, that is a balm for them. You are their mental health just by regulating and being there and welcoming them and knowing their name. Every time you say an emotion and you say, wow, I'm feeling kind of down today, that shows them that it's okay to feel down and it's okay to say out loud that you're feeling down. So being emotionally literate, I think, and not, because this is so politicized sometimes. We hear on the political microphone that we get wishy and squishy in the classrooms and you're barraged with criticism. But every day you go in, you be emotionally literate, you have a safe, consistent environment. You guys are healing children, okay, just by doing what you do. And so I just want to thank you for that.
Man, that was good. So well said. Also on that same topic, a question, I'm going to sort of combine a couple, but the impact, Kelly, you're sort of talking about that, but the impact that social media, video games, especially online gaming, have on children and teen mental health, and then also the fear that we are in, especially with an uptick in school shootings, all of those things negatively impact our kids' mental health. So how do we deal with those things?
Well, I just finished teaching a parenting class, and we had about 50 participants, and I was shocked by the parents' anxiety over apps. You know, I'm from a different generation. That was not a problem when we were raising our kids, but just the deep concern about what kids are able to pick up, internet, apps, etc. And I think there is a lot of anxiety about that. So being aware of what your children are plugged into is critically important. Understanding that, researching that, limiting that, having boundaries, and having the kind of a family culture where you can talk about those things. we don't use this kind of an app because, this is who we are. Develop that identity as a family, and then you can build on that and be able to talk about those things. Otherwise, kids are just getting those influences, and they don't have any kind of way, any context in which to understand them or decide what's good, bad, etc., or even understand the influence they have on their lives.
And sometimes kids wrestle with that, right? Especially
Right.
if they have friends who have all the access in the world to all of the things, right? Or have phones in elementary school or whatever it is. And so what we have always reinforced with our kids is, like, these are the boundaries for our family. And if somebody is challenging you on them, just blame me. Like, I'm tough as nails. I literally could care less if you're like, hey, my mom said I can't have that app, or I can't watch that video. Like, my mom said that's just not okay, right? Instead of them saying, I can't do that. No, that their peer pressure thing is very real. Allow yourself to be their out. We can handle it, right? Mm-hmm. They cannot. Developmentally, their brains, they're not there. I tell my 17-year-old son all the time, I am your prefrontal cortex, man, until you're 24. So just get ready. I'm making all serious decisions for you. It's kind of a joke at this point. But seriously, our children's brains are not developed. They are not capable of handling what is in front of them in terms of a screen.
I think the millennial parent, we are an unusual breed because we've lived half our lives with and half our lives without. And I know as an auntie and my parent friends, we have kind of seen a shift away from like how our boomer parents are. Sorry about that term. But like with the shift of wanting to be more friends with our kid, which there's nothing wrong with that, but you also have to remember, like, you have to establish boundaries as that parent. And just because somebody else's kid got a phone when they were 8 years old doesn't mean your kid necessarily needs to have a phone when they were 8 years old. It's okay to tell your kids no and to tell them they can't TikTok and do all those other shenanigans. There's parental controls on all of this stuff for a reason, and there's no reason not to use it. I just think as millennials, we really need to step up and do a lot better by our kids by establishing these clear guidelines and realizing that it is okay to have a healthy balance between being parent and friend.
I will say that there is a bunch of creepy stuff out there, you guys. And I will also say, since the internet and social media, and especially TikTok and Instagram, we are seeing much more mirrored behavior in eating disorders and movement disorders and bizarre tics and different kinds of stuff out there because the students are just staring at it and like internalizing it, and their own brain is like mirroring that kind of behavior. And so I want to reiterate, it's fine to set limits, it's good to set limits, and the thing that I want to say to every parent here and to your friends and to any groups that you belong to, you must model also that kind of thing. You have to be willing to take technology breaks and even technology big breaks, like getting away outdoors, all those things, because those are healthy. But what I see so many times is the dichotomy of parents telling their child to do a behavior and them not doing it. And so I used to teach family medicine residents. And so we have all of these cameras in the room, and they would be saying, my child is addicted to the internet, and as soon as the doctor walks out, digging in their purse, like pulling out of their pocket and getting right on their phones. And so doing the behavior that they were complaining about to the doctor right in front of the child. And so if you're sending mixed signals, you're not going to be very useful. So.
Definitely be intentional about that. I know I'm not a mom, but I am a professional aunt, and I know that when I'm with my boys, my two nephews who are 23 and 13, yes, they are brothers, it is quite the spread, but when I go to Kansas to visit them, we all put our phones down, and our family plays dominoes and board games, and it gets violent because you're not going to beat me. Not violent, really. You know what I mean. But the phones go away. And the oldest one has said to me more than once, Aunt Trap, that really meant a lot to me that you sat down and we played dominoes for 6 straight hours. And I'm like, yes, my back is pained for it now. But he sees that and he appreciates it. And his little brother now that he has a smartphone, he puts his away and it doesn't come out between rounds of dominoes. We all just do it. And that helps them. I think that really helps them understand that that time is valuable.
Does. And I want to take back, I feel like I was scolding. And I want to repair.
You're okay.
I don't want
Don't apologize.
What I want to say is, you can do it. You can do it. I want to encourage you and to reach out to your friends and encourage each other. So if,
I was
in case
definitely
you're-
scolding you.
Yeah, okay.
I like what you said so much because it's relational. And that's the key really to it, is to just create an environment where relationships can develop and positive relations. You're an aunt connected to that family, another positive voice in her nephew's lives. I just think that's so important. Be intentional in creating those kind of things.
There was an aspect of this question we didn't address, and that was about the school shootings thing. And I would say, in respect to that thing, watch the news with your kids. Let them ask you questions. When I was a junior in high school, we had a class called Current Events, where we would spend like 30 minutes watching CNN, and then like we would spend the last 20 minutes of class asking questions and discussing like what we had just seen. This way, you can help your children cipher through the information. They're gonna find out about it. Like they're gonna find out about it, and it's better that they have a meaningful conversation with you as parents where they can ask questions about what's going on. But again, this is one of those situations where like you have to be mindful of like not necessarily putting out your adult opinions super hard when having these discussions with them, but try to address these things as they come, so that way like your child and you as well can deal with these news stories as they come, and that way you can have some level of control and understanding of what information they have about a topic and gauge kind of where they're at emotionally in responding and understanding the topic.
All right, Jennifer, I think we probably have time for 2 more questions.
Okay. So what legal rights do kids have versus adults regarding electronic messaging with privacy? And does this change over time? Like, are there milestones to note? Anyone want to tackle that one?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
All social media platforms have a required age. So, for example, I am a Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and my little is, well, she's 16 now, which is nuts to think about. But because of the age requirements, I can't actually send her messages on Facebook or Instagram. Like, I can only comment directly on her things. In regards to privacy laws, minors don't have any privacy laws in regards to social media messaging. So there's that.
I will go back and say I don't know the answer to that, but I will also say this. I know a lot of parents, and I know them very well. Some of them are very, very close to me, who say to their kids, oh, you don't have to be 13 to be on there. Just make up your birthday.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Do not.
Don't do it. Yeah, they'll say, oh, just push your year out so you can be on there. You're 10, you can handle it. No, no, you all know how old I am, and there are times I can't handle social media.
Yep.
I mean, it's just, if we all think about it, we're probably all on there, and it's a mess. So make sure you're enforcing that, and if they are on it, watch what they're doing.
All apps have parental controls that allow you to determine that as well. You just have to go into the settings and fool around with it.
And likewise, even with like your streaming, any of your streaming channels, you've got to be monitoring all that as well. It's not just the phone.
Passwords on those.
Yeah, passwords. Yep.
So for kids who are super high achieving, involved in multiple activities, is there anything that parents should look for to make sure they're not overwhelmed and feeling like they must strive for perfection? I know in the news recently there have been several like very high achieving young athletes who have, everything was great and they were so amazing and they were so great at it, and then they committed suicide and it was a complete shock. So what should parents look for in that situation?
Make sure your children know they don't have to be perfect. If you don't win that baseball game, it's okay. If you don't make the shot and your team doesn't win, it's okay. It's not your fault. It's the whole team's fault, because we all should have not been at the point that one shot was the make or break. Make sure that those kids, those high achieving, those perfectionists, I did not make straight A's, but I had an older sister who is a genius and did make straight A's. And I remember the first time in middle school that I got a B. And I was going home and I was like, my mom is going to kill me. And I went in and I said, Mom, I got a B. And she looked at me and she said, did you try your hardest? And I said, yes. And she goes, okay, a B is fine. And I have carried that with me forever, that as long as you try your hardest, it's fine. And sometimes your hardest may be a C in physics or a C in chemistry, or maybe finding out that what you thought you wanted to be when you grew up isn't what you want to be because you don't have those skills. Make sure your kids know it's okay. I also would encourage you to let them see you fail. Talk about your failures. Talk about, hey, I interviewed for my dream job and I thought I was going to get it, but I didn't. And I'm sad today, but tomorrow it's going to be okay. Tomorrow, yes, I am a naturally positive person. My favorite thing to say, and my nephews will both tell you this, is everything's going to look better through the morning light tomorrow. It always will. But make sure, check with them. Those kids who are high achieving, hey, if you're not doing okay with this, let's make sure we're helping you. Make sure we're getting you that support that you need. It is okay to not be perfect, because none of us are.
D.W. Winnicott's one of the greatest therapists that ever lived, and he was just a magnificent guy. He was an Army doctor, and he, in a war in World War II, and he saw the suffering of his young soldiers. And he realized, he noticed that in some cases, some of the soldiers suffered more than others emotionally, and it had a lot to do with the way they were raised. And he eventually became sort of the father of psychotherapy for children. And one of his great discoveries was trying to be a perfect parent actually harms children. Trying to be a perfect teacher, trying to be a perfect coach, that's actually really destructive for children in their lives. And he came up with a great phrase. He was particularly helping mothers, and he came up with this great phrase, the good enough mother. That's his most famous thing you will hear about him. And I think it's such a great concept. Be a good enough mother, be a good enough dad, be a good enough teacher, be a good enough coach, a good enough friend, good enough to help children, encourage them, affirm them, but don't push them toward perfection. Now, sometimes you get kids who are just naturally driven toward perfection. And exactly as has been said, you have to model for them that there's things that are okay besides perfection. And be able to, I think, talk about those failures is really important. Talking about your own failures and how you process them and live with them is just really important.
Yeah, I love the good enough. I use it all the time. I use it on myself. If you have a hypervigilant child has amazing capacity, very high achiever, the first level would just be to watch and see if they're able to self-regulate. Do they take downtime for themselves? Do they say, are they able to say no? Do they set limits sometimes, with their peers? Do you see them managing their schedules? Because our children who have that massive capacity, a desire to, excel, they run their calendars just like we do, And so I think the second level would simply be if you see that they start getting upset because they couldn't reach a limit, get a goal, if they missed something, if they're obsessing on, what they didn't do well as opposed to, the 98% that did. If you start seeing them obsess, ruminate, those kinds of things, then those are behaviors that you need to pay attention to and maybe get checked in about. And so you'll know your child, but watching, just to see, maybe they're really good at life, and that's cool. But maybe they are listening to our society, which is less and less and less, or people are getting test scores that they need for scholarships, and they can't get into a system because there's only 100 slots and 100,000 are applying. There's all of these pressures that you hear all of the time. And so the good enough is a lovely concept, but making sure that maybe they're handling it, or if they're not, definitely stepping in.
Well, I would love to be able to give our panelists one more opportunity. Anything that we have not talked about or stated or emphasized that you feel is valuable, that you have a yearning to share, please go ahead and do that now. Lauren, go for it.
Okay. I didn't invite my parents tonight because I know it hurts them to hear me talk about this because they internalize a lot of my actions as failures on their part. And so I try to spare them their feelings. My mom and dad didn't know that I had tried to kill myself a bunch of times until I told them when I was 27 years old. But in high school alone, I probably tried 7 or 8 times. And I could never quite bring myself to go all the way through with it. And I was that high achieving kid. I was on varsity volleyball all 4 years and varsity track all 4 years. I was in the French club. I was on debate team. By all accounts, I seemed like I was pretty normal, but I am a master at masking. Part of why I dressed up and dressed the way that I did tonight was because I wanted to demonstrate that depression and mental health don't look anything like you think they do. And so you have to be really intentional when paying attention to your kids. And if you're going to be an ally, you really have to research what that means. Something that I see a lot, and I know it comes from a good place, but it always bothers me when I see it, is when people post the suicide hotline number and say, I'm a safe place. But I don't think they actually know what that means to say they're a safe place. You can't tell people that you're a safe place for them if you don't actually know what that entails. And if you don't know what to do if there's a crisis, and if you don't know what to say to someone who is possibly teetering on the edge. And there's just such a wide berth of information available out there that I think it's just so important that everyone leave here tonight and really engage in what it means to truly be an ally and to be there for the people that you love in case they're in crisis. The end.
Start early. Start with your kids from the time they are tiny, tiny, tiny. I mean, 4 years old, younger than that. My office has a book called Gizmo's Guide to Positivity, I believe. It's got this little cute black and white dog in it, and it's designed for kids who are 4 to 10. And Edmond, the elementary schools have this book, and it takes you through. What it basically does is, in a very relatable way for the age, we do what's called a Stanley Brown safety plan. So we help these kids know that their emotions they're absolutely valid. Their feelings are valid. What they're doing, that's absolutely valid to feel sad, to be upset, to be happy. And then it walks through, who are the safe people in your life? You know, when they're 4 or 5, it's going to be mom and dad. But when they get a little older, who are the safe people in your life? It may be the teacher. It may be the aunt. It may be the next door neighbor. Make sure your kids at all ages have safe adults. That may not be you, and if that can't be you, that's understandable. But make sure that you know who that safe adult is for your child, and make sure that they have access to them 24/7. And if you have somebody who's struggling, 988, it's the way to go. I promise you. And if y'all want me to come back and and I'm not trying to promote this, I don't get paid to do trainings, but I'll come back and do suicide prevention training if you guys want me to.
Okay, a couple of things that I've learned in Zero Suicide and running some suicide programs across health systems is, one, there is no wrong door. So don't feel like, or I would encourage you to just, whatever you can do, the 988, that's a door. The hospital, that's a door. The telephone, that's a door. The police, that's a door. A lot of people get tripped up over wondering if they're doing it right, or maybe, not sure. And so health professionals are all equipped to do something what's called a ligature check, which means we tighten the cracks. We do as much as we can in all of the systems in the community to not let anybody fall through the cracks. And so please just know that whatever door you choose to reach out to, that'll probably get you to the next door, and so there's lots of help out there, and that leads me to my other piece that I wanted to say. The one big, huge research that I've done over almost 30 years is I study help seeking. And one of the things that is so weird is the communities always say, oh, we would always encourage people to go seek help. And yeah, we would never judge people to seek help. And then smaller communities, same thing. Oh, we would reach out and we would help people, and we would, in our micro communities, we would help people. When it gets down to the family system, it's agreeing together to seek help is the tightest dynamic that can't be cracked. And so in your household may be the toughest dynamics you have to push through in order to help save someone's life. That's kind of interesting because these are the people that love you the most, but it's also the people that we may talk each other out of things the most, okay? So please know that the no wrong door people are out there, and even if you have to go against the advice or the dynamics in your household, you're making the right decision because we're not judging each other. We do want to help. Those systems are out there, and they've done their best to seal the cracks. And so, but the tightest bonds may be right where you go home tonight. So,
Thank you. Part of our culture, it's true in Oklahoma, but other parts of the country as well, particularly in Oklahoma, has been to think about suicide as a moral issue. If people just were stronger morally, if they just were closer to God, if they had a deeper faith, if they, made better choices, if they had a stronger will, they wouldn't have suicidal thoughts. And I think that's not the best way to think about it. I invite you to think about it in a different way. Suicidal thoughts reveal deep suffering. It's about suffering. And when we hear this, people talking about that or talking about their sadness, their sense of isolation, they're talking about their suffering, which is something that we all should be caring about and willing to invest ourselves in. So look for those places where there's suffering and be aware of people who are suffering and invest your time and your life in those people and in those places, and we can make a difference. We can save lives. But to do that, we have to be intentional, aware, and involved.
Wow. Is this not, I can't think of a better panel than this. Can you? Let's give them a round of applause.
Great.
So well done. Thank you all for being here, for participating, for such incredible questions, and I don't even think we got through them all. So I will speak on behalf of the panelists and say that all of us are happy to stick around for a little bit if you'd like to come visit with us and just seek connection with us, because we, as stated, we're all here to support.
There is a resource table.
And there's a resource table out in the lobby. Yes, please hit that up as well.
Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. My name is Mark Foster. I'm the founding senior pastor here, and we want you to know that we are so glad that you're here. We're so glad for the wisdom that is at the table and for your leadership and for the tech team and everybody that sets up and for your leadership and your help, and we thank you for that. It is true that no one pulls themselves up by their bootstraps. Just think about it. That's dumb. It's not possible. And so we know that our young people thrive in community. We know that big people thrive in community, and we need community. There's lots and lots of studies about that. Just because I want to make sure we've got it. What is the number? There we go. Yes. And, and just to be super explicit, yes, we do want you to come back and do training. Yeah. We'd love for you to be here. Make no mistake about it. That's a yes, yes, and a yes, of course. Just because I am the pastor here and your host here, we want you to know that if you don't have a place, you're welcome here. Everyone is welcome here. That's our first core value. You're welcome. Everyone's welcome. Period. Dot. That's just where it ends. You're welcome. The community here is a place where I just want you to know that I have received calls, people in our church have received calls that said, hey, my freshman is thinking about self-harm. Can you come? And yes. And then we call the facility and it's full. We call another facility and it's full. And we drive to Norman. And we get there about 3 a.m. And we make sure that child is safe. And just make sure they're safe. Because nothing else happens until your kid's safe. You all know this. But we all need someone to call. And people don't just happen to know that. right? They don't know that they can call you unless you tell them, you can call me. I'll come. We'll be there. And so I hope if you don't have that, that you advocate for that you let other people know that you can be that for them, because this is so important. We're just so grateful to all of you. And I also want you to know that we have a God that loves you, not because of what you do, but because of who you are, that you're wonderfully made. And in a performance culture with our kids, it's so important they know that God loves them because God loves them because God loves them. There's nothing else after that, because they're God's kids. God loves them because he made them. And we try to do that too. So as a recovering perfectionist myself, that's the case. Let me pray for us and we'll be around. Lord God, we thank you for health, for mental health, for the bravery and courage shown tonight. We thank you for the vulnerability and the grace that surrounds us. And we pray that you would guide us. Guide and help and protect the children that are represented here and all your children all around the world. Help us let the world know that you love them, that they are valuable, beautiful, and precious in your sight because they are yours. Help us to love them well. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks for coming out.
You guys are fabulous. Thank you. You were awesome. Appreciate you. Jennifer told me you would
Thank
do
you so much. I love your socks, by the way.